What up, punks?
Clap, clap.
Clap, clap.
Slap, slap, slap.
What up, punks? Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast. I'm your host, Phil, and across from me is your boy,
Josh.
This week, we will be discussing Spider-Man Far From Home.
Go away. My dog is bugging me. Go. Get out of here. Go down. Jeez. Dummy.
And we will be talking about how it fares in respect to other MCU films and what we thought and all that stuff, and maybe whatever comes to our mind as we go. So, before we get into that, if you want to see where all of our episodes are, or check out some writing that we've been working on, or buy some merch, you can go to popculturepunks.com, which is where you can find all that stuff. So, and there's also a contact form. So if you want to contact us, the form, I think, just sends it to our email. So then we'll
sends it right to us.
Any questions, comments, hate mail, whatever, we'll take it all in stride. So
go for it. Hasn't been used yet, so someone's got to break the bank. And
we've gotten emails, but we have not gotten contact form emails. Contact us.
That's what we want.
At your earliest convenience.
Yes, sir.
So all right.
Cool. Spidey Far From Home.
Spidey Far From Home, the most recent movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
and the only one coming out for another year or something.
It's it's technically the cap. So this is technically the end game of this phase of of the MCU.
Okay, so this is
which makes sense based on what happened in the movie. It's kind of like closing out the saga.
Yes,
which kind of feels weird because it's like Endgame was this whole thing. And all of a sudden, just
to have a not a lesser movie, but just
chill Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like chill relative to Endgame.
Let's go to Europe.
Yeah, let's go on a school trip.
Also, mega spoilers. So this is going to be a no holds.
Yeah, we will spoil everything.
No holds barred.
No holds barred.
No holds
bars held.
No nothing. No,
we're not holding nothing back.
We ain't holding nothing.
Oh, we're tired.
Yeah, it's been a long weekend. This was one of those 3 podcast weekends, and then we were going to try to do some other stuff, but then VR came into the mix, and we played that for literally 6 hours straight.
Yeah, that was one thing we discovered this weekend was how amazing VR is.
That was gnarly.
I've always been skeptical of it, and now
super gnarly.
My biceps are sore from playing super hot.
My brain, when I was asleep, I could see the floating screen, with my eyes closed, where it's off in the distance, because it wasn't the TV burn-in sometimes you get when you go to bed. It was the my eyes are moving, and there's this floating disembodied
you
screen.
Feel like you're floating, the little jump thing in that samurai game.
Yeah, exactly. And you're
oh, so fun though.
Oh, that was
so
blast.
Fun.
Yeah, that was rowdy.
Yeah.
So no motion sickness. I was surprised. That one Saintero, or I don't even know how to pronounce it. It was just this new.
I don't know.
Came out not
July
even
10th.
a week ago. Yeah, so a couple days ago, and we played that, and that is rad. That was
there's
that was probably my favorite game.
And you can dual wield a katana and a assault rifle,
shotgun and whatever. All these weird samurai dudes running at you. It was that was
a
sick.
blast.
That was absolutely dope.
Super Hot was fun.
Yup.
Beat Saber was fun.
Beat Saber was fun.
Oh man.
We did a little bit of Blood and Truth. The start of that was pretty cool. That was probably
one
the most advanced.
More impressive one, yeah.
Yeah.
The graphics actually looked pretty decent for a VR
And then Tonio and Nick played a little bit of Everybody's Golf, which that was kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, it was fun just watching them golf. I don't know. It was entertaining.
Those freaking NPCs, of all the games to be these rude,
the Savage Caddies,
make sure you get
get it in the hole
time. And you're oh my gosh, yes, I will.
And they're talking while you're trying to golf, which is
swing
a big no.
Do it. Come on, loser.
So fun. So fun, but so tiring.
Oh yes.
But yeah, it's been a good weekend.
So now we're back in the real world.
The saddle.
The real thing.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Spider-Man? Because usually we just talk about things before we do the podcast, and then we just talk about it again.
Yep.
But we've avoided talking about it for some reason.
Well, I think the
we
reason
just had a lot of other stuff to chat about.
I think because when you texted me and I got your text first after you had seen it, because I saw it a week later. It came out in a Thursday night, and then I saw it the following Tuesday, so it was only a couple days. But you were dude, holy crap, this was awesome. And I was oh boy, I'm super excited. And then when I came out of it, my response to you was I
don't even think you texted me when you came out of it. It was the next day.
It was the next morning.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that you saw it. And I'm wait, you saw it?
You're wait. Hold on.
And
what happened?
Yeah.
And honestly, my reaction was not the same as when I came out of Far From Home. Not that I didn't like it, but I don't think the
different things
juice,
that irks you, maybe?
yeah, that juiced feeling I had coming out of Homecoming, where
so maybe that's why we were avoiding it, because I wanted my reaction to what you had to say to be
to be like
genuine
in the moment.
Yeah. But now I heard some things last night when we were kind of discussing it that I'm like, oh, that makes sense, because
very brief.
I know you've had that these specific complaints about other things too. So.
Yeah, so I feel like they're not inconsistent with like who I am. I think they're more just my preference. So to kick it off, I think I really enjoyed Mysterio. I was talking to a coworker who he's like even bigger Spider-Man fan than I am, like has 2 Spider-Man tattoos that like he designed himself, and we were talking about it, and he and I actually had a pretty similar opinion. Like we both really, really, really enjoyed it, but I think we were just feeling like the teenage part of like Peter Parker's life, which is a great part of his character.
Yeah,
it felt too. My preference is, if you're gonna write a teenage character, don't make it cliche. And I felt like to a certain degree,
it was a little cliche.
It was a little cliche, and not that there's anything inherently wrong with that. I think for me personally, with how the MCU has structured the individual films, usually they're not, even if it's like predictable, that doesn't mean it's cliche, because they're writing the story to be like, oh, they're probably gonna like do this thing. Whereas, you know, when Peter's goal is like, I want to take Mary Jane up to the Eiffel Tower and give her this necklace, you're like that felt, there was just like something in the very, very subjective part of my brain was just like, I don't like that. Like, yeah. I get it. I almost wish, sorry, I'll finish this thought. I think to stay on that train, I think if I had to articulate it better, I wanted his emotions and his desire to not be Spider-Man to be tied more to the trauma of Endgame than to like teen drama, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and that's a personal preference.
Yeah, I think for me, I see where you're coming from, because I think in the context of what this movie is being made in, it is a little weird. But I think that being said, like the weird, like is he supposed to be like pretty young? I don't know if they ever said specifically
he's like
what
a
his
sophomore,
age is.
junior in high school.
Okay,
or
so
because I think in Homecoming he was a freshman. So depending on how much time has passed, and I think technically 5 years. It was like 5 years. So,
but he would still be in the same grade. So
right,
he would still be like a sophomore probably.
Which that was one of the funniest parts of the whole movie. Is like,
I love how they actually acknowledged it too. Like,
because
Evan and I were joking, like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, so like half his classmates are just 5 years older now,
right?
And I was like, they better acknowledge this in the movie,
yeah.
And they like literally start off with
they lean into it so hard,
yeah. And I think with like the teenage stuff, like in some ways it is cliche, but in some ways like it felt realistic to me, because I remember having like daydreams like that in high school and thinking about all this stuff and like
the girl
having
Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, like weird things that like when you look back on it, you're like, oh,
I was such a kid.
So I think it felt realistic to me, and I know like Evan really liked it, and you said Gloria liked it and stuff.
Yep.
But I do think now that you say it, like the fact that they focused more on that than what happened in Endgame. And I mean, they did acknowledge the Endgame stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think that this movie kind of focused more on like the relationship stuff.
Right.
And in a way that does feel a little bit like you're kind of just ignoring it. But maybe that's Peter's response to it, is like he's trying to get it out of his head. So he's focusing more of his energy on like trying to be normal.
Right.
Even though like he can't. And that's kind of the whole movie, is him trying to be normal and trying to force that and do all these things. But he's just going to keep getting swept up into like, you're never going to escape being Spider-Man.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting, because it's a parallel to the first one, where he's like,
absolutely.
He wants so desperately to be an Avenger and to be Iron Man. And in this one, he's like running from that. Like, I've seen what that turns me into, and I don't want to be that anymore.
Right. And I think that was actually the thought in my mind that I actually did like, is that this movie is almost a complete subversion of Homecoming, which is awesome. I think I wasn't a fan of it being tied to more or less a relationship he was pursuing with this girl that we've only had him trying to pursue that relationship for like 30 seconds in the old movie. You know, it wasn't like Homecoming was the entire movie he was trying to impress or share his feelings for Mary Jane. He was going after this other girl. It was this random girl. It was the Vulture's daughter.
Yeah.
So I think, because I was talking to C. Lynch about it, he was texting me, and we were kind of going back and forth, and he had some good points too. And I think one of the things he said, and I'll actually pull it up, but while I'm pulling it up, I'll just kind of ramble, was that it was like, it felt like it was too quick. Like it was this thing that we spent this whole movie kind of him going after and him having all these feelings, and it just felt, I think that's why the romantic stuff didn't sit well with me, is because it felt too fast. And I think in any medium ever, like whenever there's like a romantic thing that like happens too quick, it just kind of doesn't sit well with me.
It's hard to portray that in a movie,
right?
In a way, and I feel like the execution of it didn't feel it, like even once they like realize, oh, we both like each other and that's actually a thing, like it didn't all of a sudden become this thing where like, oh, now they're like making out and like it was like this cute little just like kiss or something, and it was like, I feel like they didn't like push it too far beyond, like in that regard. I don't think it was too quick in a sense, but
yeah. So this was so I had a back and forth with Chris, and one of the points that he made that I was like, oh, maybe that's, I feel like he put a pin on like why I was feeling this way about the motion stuff, but he said after a couple other rebuttals, he said, I felt like they bundled the May knowing like Peter's identity, and it felt like they skipped a chapter with him and MJ between movies. And so I think like that kind of was like, oh, that's why it didn't sit well. It wasn't the romance or the teenage, like, oh, I like care about this girl or whatever. Like it wasn't that inherently. It was like, the last movie, you were in a galactic war between this giant purple dude. You just lost your father figure, and you're sad. And they spend a lot of the movie having Peter express like, this is hard. Like this is a hard thing. But then the other half of the movie, he's like, oh, I really want to take Mary Jane on this thing, and all this like, what was that? The one guy that he was like fighting with the entire movie.
Yeah, I forget his name, but he was one of the blip guys.
Yeah, I'll just call him Craig. He's like, oh, Craig, like he's going after Mary Jane. Like I got to do something, and I think that was like, wait a second, like, and maybe I'm totally acknowledging that I'm probably being overly picky of like the execution of the teenage side. I think I just prefer, because teenage stuff can feel, especially for us as like, you know, adults who have kind of gone through that phase, it feels, I feel like, more cringy, because we're like, it's very true, but like I don't want to see this again kind of thing.
I think it's one of those things where I felt the same way, but at the same time I like that sort of stuff because it's kind of like it's not made for you sort of thing. It very true. It fits within the context of this Peter, I think, because he's younger, and a lot of the Spider-Mans we've had, like, even though they're young, like they've been presented as older. Yeah. Or like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, he's like college at that point. So
yeah, and then he's like out of college.
Yeah, so like we grew up with a Peter Parker who is like old and like older than we were. Yep. And now this Peter's like way younger than we were. So it's like inversed itself.
Totally.
And I do agree it feels weird, but I feel like part of me had like sits in that dissonance of like, this is because even Homecoming had that, like he's going to a dance and he's awkward and like he doesn't want to do this thing. And
I think, okay, so so that's a good point. I think with that though, what I loved about them leaning into that is it's like, yes, he does get the girl and he goes to the dance, but then the mega plot twist of that movie is like, oh, and by the way, the Vulture is her dad, and Peter knows, and because he's seen him, and he's like, oh, frick. And so that being the twist, like all of a sudden everything I felt like that's why I enjoyed Homecoming so much, was everything was kind of intertwined. Like it felt more directly connected, where it was like, and maybe I need to just think deeper about Far From Home and like how those interconnections happen, and it just didn't click right away for me. But it felt like when Homecoming, Peter's like trying so hard to be like the Avenger Spider-Man, and then it's like, no, you need to be the neighborhood Spider-Man. And how that happens is high school, he's being chased by these goons, and like, you know, he finally gets this girl that he gets her to go with him to the Homecoming, and she ends up being the daughter of the main villain, and you're like, whoa, like twist, like what? And then that sends this whole emotion that Peter's feeling, and then the Vulture starts connecting the dots, and the whole time Peter, and then it's this like awkward, like, oh frick, what's gonna happen? Yeah. Whereas I felt like in Far From Home, everything felt like separate, and they didn't like, I don't know.
Well, I think I'm just like, I think I'm processing. Yeah, I think it's because of the nature of the movie, because they're on like a school field trip. The bad guys like some other characters separate from like these specific characters, but I think that it feels like that because they are in a different country. Like they're not tied down to like New York or whatever at this point, maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a different type of story in a sense. Like it is like it's a superhero movie, but with like the core of it being like basically like a high school field trip type movie.
Yeah.
Which is like, and then they had to like somehow write a superhero movie into that. So I don't know. It's hard to parse why it feels that way.
Right.
Because I agree it does feel like that, but for me, I more easily can write it off as like this is speaking to a different age group than me.
Yeah.
And like I can still see, because I think for me the crux of the story for me was like the Mysterio stuff and Peter wrestling with like the opposite thing for me. So I was like drawn to that more of just focusing on that. Maybe, I don't know.
And maybe that's part of it. Is it felt like there were too many, like Peter was dealing with too many emotional things that it was almost overwhelming because he felt off to me. And
but maybe that's supposed to be the point. Because like,
maybe it is.
Imagine Endgame happens to
sense.
you,
right?
And now all of a sudden you have to go back to high school. You have to deal with the fact that half the people you used to know are 5 years older, and now there's these kids who were like in kindergarten that are the same age as you who are like trying to steal the girl you like, and like it's like Peter basically has to deal with like being a normal kid while also like people keep trying to force like Nick Fury's keeps coming after him, which that
was funny.
Yeah, and Happy is talking to him, and his aunt is like, she knows he's Spider-Man, and she's trying to get him to like, no, you need to bring your suit and all this stuff, and like it's kind of like it's almost like the intent is supposed to be disorienting. Like he's not
That's
dealing.
What life is supposed
he's
to
not
feel
dealing
like
with
now.
these things appropriately.
Yeah,
like
sense.
It's almost like he should be facing what happened more directly, but instead he's forcing himself to like chase after this girl or like do these like kid things because that's all he knows how to do. Because he's like, I'm a kid, I gotta go do this. So
definitely,
that's kind of how I felt it. But I think there is like a dissonance there of like he's dealing with so many things. And I think from a narrative perspective, that can get kind of bogged down, even if that's what you're intending it to be like.
Right. And I feel like sometimes the execution on that can be tricky because if it's... And I think maybe that's where the skeptic in me is like, I don't think that was intentional, but maybe it was fully intentional, is we're trying to take this teenage kid who in the past movie was like, yeah, superhero stuff, yeah. And then in this one, it's like... And he just went through like this giant fight and lost his, this mentor / father figure.
Yeah.
He's kind of wrecked inside. And so he's going to be emotionally all over the place. And so this will be my only, like my other, like last, I would say like bigger gripe with it is I think the other reason that some of these things didn't sit well with me is because I was waiting for them to lean into and like directly reference things from Endgame. I wanted moments that we experienced to be the things that, like, when Peter's sitting up on the roof and talking to Beck, he's telling him, I'm torn up inside. I don't want to do this. Like, I had this guy who, like, trained me to be who I am, and I did all this stuff, and I, like, watched him die. Like, I can't undo that from my mind. Like, I need an escape. I need a distraction. And, like, I almost craved like a direct, blunt statement from Peter to say like, "This is why I'm feeling."
I feel like that
things.
did happen, but maybe I was just
I missed
inserting
it
into the story myself.
And I think I was,
because I think what they were trying to do with Beck, like he was like a pseudo, like a Tony Stark replacement kind of. For Peter.
Like
Peter was confiding in the bar,
in him, like he puts the glasses on and like he starts getting choked. Like Peter starts getting choked up, and like that to me was a brilliant scene.
Yeah.
Like that was fantastic, and that was probably one of my favorite parts in the movie. And I think I think this is the more skeptical creative side of me coming out in the analysis is I think I just wanted, my preference is I wanted more specific moments and not like right away in the first like 10 minutes. Like, yes, build up that Peter has this anxiety about like being a superhero and he doesn't want to take on this thing. But then towards the end, like when he's on the plane with Happy, he's like, he kind of says like, yeah, I miss him. And I think we all know why. But there's part of me of like, I want Peter's character to vocalize that to someone, to say like why he misses him, because there's a whole bunch of reasons he could miss him.
Yeah,
like, he
but
could miss him.
Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe
and that's a good point too.
I'm trying to think from like the perspective of a teenager who like almost like, I feel like if I was a teenager and whatever happened in Endgame happened to me, like I wouldn't be able to properly like vocalize. You know what I mean? I think in some ways I feel like it is a part of his character. Like you do, at least I took from the movie, like you do get things like that reference Endgame,
right?
But it's more subtle. It's like when he sees like the graffiti and like he can't escape Iron Man, like he can't escape, or like
the presentation,
or
the
like
beginning,
Happy keep talking to him, and Nick Fury keep coming after him, and he's like, I can't be Iron Man, like I don't want to be Iron Man, like why did Tony leave me with this? It's almost like, why did Tony leave me with this burden to bear on my shoulders? Like I'm not him. So he's almost like dealing with it by trying to run away instead of like
actually diving into
vocalizing.
Why am I feeling these things.
And I think
that's a good point. That's a
it would
really
almost
good
be
point.
out of character for a teenager to like perfectly vocalize
dive into their
why
self
they're
and out.
feeling
Yeah,
it
that's a good
that
point.
way.
Yeah,
and I think for me, I'm kind of the opposite. Like I didn't like Homecoming as much because it felt like Spider-Man's story was way too intertwined. Like I feel like most of the other heroes got to have their own story before they were thrown into the mix.
Yeah.
Whereas Spider-Man's first movie was basically him like desperately wanting to be an Avenger. And I mean, again, using my own arguments against me, that makes sense because he's a teenager and all of a sudden he's a superhero. He's like, I want to be like in the team of superheroes. Like I want to be friends with the Captain America and like all these things. Yeah. And it makes sense, but there's still a part of me that like wishes. And I think based on the after credit scenes, we might get an actual like Spider-Man movie. But like part of me just wants like a Spider-Man movie that's not super
contingent on
contingent on all of the Avengers stuff. Because like
for sure,
Captain America, we've gotten plenty of stuff that's not direct. Like most of the early Avengers movies, like there were hints and tie-ins and stuff, but they all also got to like be their own hero for a while.
Right.
Whereas it feels like Peter's always had to wrestle with this. Which I think it makes sense. I'm not arguing that they should do it differently. It's more just
just a craving for something.
It's kind of like with you with the high school stuff. With me, it's like, okay, at this point, like the MCU is a little bit too tied in now. Like I want to have more personal hero stories now. And stuff like that. Plus, the fun part about Spider-Man is just him being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and like swinging around the city and working for the paper and taking pictures and beating up bad guys. Like, I don't know. I kind of miss that sort of like down to earth heroism.
Yeah, for sure. So, no, as you're saying all these things, like I will acknowledge, and I think like those are all really good points. Like I think I was watching it through the lens of not trying to engage of like where Peter's fully coming from. I think I was over elevating where he should be at as in an emotional maturity. So I'm like, dude, like you're feeling this because of this. Like why don't you see that? And like why aren't you telling me that? Because I want to hear that. Because that resonates with me deeper than just like, oh, I miss him, because that's like a very teenager thing to say. I don't really like teenager stuff.
Yeah.
So like, it's just kinda,
that makes sense.
Yeah. But that aside, I really, really, really love this movie. Like, I wanted to get the gripes out at the beginning and just kind of like, these were the only things that were kind of floating around in my mind as I was watching it. But the rest of it, like the second half of the film was just fantastic. Like,
I'm curious.
Loved it.
So I think Mysterio is probably one of my favorite bad guys in the MCU just because of, I don't know, he's just dope. Like his powers are so trippy and weird and like, and the way that it's like intertwined with technology and stuff, it's just like a weird commentary on tech and stuff. And it's kind of funny because I always felt like the Vulture too was one of the more like compelling villains in the MCU because if like
they felt real. Like,
I remember Evan and I went to this thing and somebody like asked us who our favorite villain was or something. It was like a murder mystery, whatever. And somebody asked us who like our favorite movie villain was, and all I could think of from the MCU was like Thanos. And I was like, wait, who are the other villains in like? Oh yeah, who are the villains in the Iron Man movies? Like some guy with electric whips. Like right. I feel like a lot of the times the enemies haven't been like super defined in a sense.
Yeah.
As like for some reason the Vulture and Mysterio feel like really like rooted in the universe's lore.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they're directly tied with like the number one hero. Like these are people who hate the person that we love. These are people who hate Tony Stark. Kind
of.
And I think that's maybe why they're so compelling in a sense, because they're like more in the Iron Man movies. A lot of those guys also hated Tony Stark, but at that point we kind of also, he was like, I can see why these guys hate him because he's kind of a D-bag and he's kind of mean to people. But by the time you get to like Tony Stark just sacrificed his life for the world, and there's still this guy who hates him.
Yeah.
And it almost adds like a deeper complexity, because there's the one line that Happy says like even Tony Stark couldn't live up to himself, Tony Stark, like live up to himself.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe why these villains are so compelling, because it's like rooted in like this character that we've grown to love.
Right. And it's interesting because as you were saying that something kind of clicked where Mysterio, as he should be, is a direct foil to Peter. Peter's running as hard as he can from the responsibilities that Tony left to him.
Yep.
And now Mysterio and like Quentin Beck is like, give me it. Like, give me it now.
Yeah,
like,
he's
this
like,
is my
I
thing.
want
He's
Iron
like,
Man's
I
mantle.
want this. Like,
Yep.
this is what this was supposed to be for. And the only thing I was kind of bummed, and this isn't like in the quality of the writing, is I remember reading like articles on the fan theories, like when it got announced that Gyllenhaal was playing that. So like the big twist was kind of spoiled.
I think
for me. Not spoiled,
knowing
but
that Mysterio is a tricky bad guy.
Yeah.
Ruined the first part of the movie for me.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting the whole movie to like for the reveal because I was like,
right, exactly.
I know something's going on
exactly.
here. Like it's obvious at this. Like only the only people who are surprised are the people who know nothing about Mysterio, basically.
Right.
So it's kind of
but
like
for them, like I
was
remember
probably
Gloria,
intense,
like
yeah.
Gloria was like fist pumping because she was like, I knew it, and so like that was cool to see. For
see, I
people
wish
who
I
aren't
wouldn't
familiar.
have told Evan because I was like telling Evan my theories.
Oh,
about
sure.
things, and so she knew too. I was like, dang it, I ruined it for you.
But I think genuinely, even going into it, there was part of me of like, are they setting up a multiverse? Like, because that's totally feasible. And like,
Yeah,
with
that'd be kind of
Into
cool.
the Spider-Verse, they could allude to like, there's this like animated universe and stuff, or this like,
That'd be so.
you know, that would be gnarly. But whole different conversation there.
Yeah.
But I felt like connecting that dot, it feels like it makes sense, and it's a deeper. There is something deeper there in Beck, like being so hungry for this tech, and Peter like willingly giving it, and then that being part of Beck's character. And man, dude, Jake Gyllenhaal as Beck.
I
was
missed a key part too because I went to the bathroom.
Of course
Classic.
you did.
It was like the part where they're in the bar.
Yeah,
And I missed the first part. I missed the part where he like subtly told him like you don't look very good with those glasses on and stuff. Like like he was
like
he knew he was a high schooler, so he was like poking those
like,
buttons.
Yeah,
and I like missed that part.
He's like, you want to hear about? He's like, you want to hear what I honestly think? He's like, you look kind of dorky. Like he just, and it was
like subtly convincing him.
But that's the thing that I love, and like you said, the realness of his villainy versus some of the other characters. I think like Killmonger's probably up there, Vulture's up there.
Yeah.
But of the other ones, like I feel like all the other villains and all the other movies are pretty caricature. I mean, you have like Red Skull, who's like, oh,
yeah, it's kind of like the classic comic book villain. Like they're just bad because they want to take over the world.
Exactly.
But these guys, like Mysterio, doesn't want to be a bad guy. He wants to be the hero.
He literally wants to be the hero.
But the way he's doing it is the same as like Thanos' method. Like to be the hero, you have to be the bad guy. Kind of. Like you have to.
Sometimes
you have to kill half the population. Sometimes
it means
to
doing
save
something
the world.
bad. Right.
Yeah. And so like it's like a warped perspective of what a hero is, and the best villains are the ones who think they're the heroes, kind of.
Right.
Which
yeah.
is,
and this one literally to the core. So yeah, I love Jake Gyllenhaal as
I really hope we're not
Mysterio.
done with him. I feel like did you see the after credit scene?
I still have to watch the second one because we'll dive into that later.
Yeah.
But
I feel like they hint that he's not gone.
I don't know. Like I'm curious to see because I feel like
I
maybe
it depends on
maybe
which
he's
after
not.
credit scene you saw. I don't know.
I saw the one with J.K. Simmons.
I think that's
back.
the one where I thought it suggested he wasn't dead because
sure
it seemed like he was setting it up.
Because part of me thinks he is dead because then they can bring in another villain, but then equally like that would be the most Mysterio trickery based on how like the skill of his
like that one dude
mirage.
like downloaded all the stuff and got away and we never saw what happened with that. So like
right.
maybe Mysterio stays but Jake Gyllenhaal's gone or something.
Right, exactly.
Which he was kind of my favorite part about the character. Like I liked the way he played it.
But that could be interesting is it's like, you know, they could do some really trippy stuff with that too, is if like there's this group of people that takes up the Mysterio mantle that keeps playing his part, or if like they have all the tech to, you know, keep doing that. But
and that's one of those things where like you love him because he didn't last long.
Yeah.
And if he kept coming back, then it's almost like
you don't want him to stay.
Yeah, I feel like because he wasn't here for very long.
Yep.
It almost makes it feel more special and like that was cool.
Definitely.
But if he came back, it would just be like, okay, you can give us new bad guys. Give us like the Scorpion or something, or the Rhino, or like some crazy bad dude guy. Because Spider-Man has some of the coolest villains in the comics. So
Big Wheel. I want to see Big Wheel in movie 3. But yeah, I think one of my favorite scene in the entire film that was like, okay, this just made this movie amazing. Because I feel like the first half, and maybe that's why I felt like less excited about this one versus Homecoming, was Homecoming, it felt like there was more even beats with like normal life superhero, which you could argue that that's overly formulaic, and it's like, but it felt like this was like running from superhero responsibility in the first half, full on superhero responsibility in the second half. And I felt like because of that, the first half of the movie, I just was like not tuning out, but it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, like, oh, he's trying to get the girl. Yeah. Oh, here comes, the water guy and like whatever. But then in the second half, like with him taking the glasses and stuff, or Mysterio taking the glasses from Peter, and then that Mirage fight scene in that parking garage, like that was awesome.
Yeah, that
like,
was one of the dopest scenes in all of the MCU, I think.
Oh, hands down. Like, and I think like the most brilliant moment in the entire thing was that thing where Mysterio, and as you're saying, as like hearkening back to what you were saying earlier about Peter being a kid and like not knowing how to express his feelings, but having us ironically projecting like, dude, this is why you're feeling this way. Even Beck knew that. And the manipulation, and so in favor of what you're arguing, totally, he manipulated him in the Mirage to the fullest extent of like let's be real, Peter, at your core, you knew that if you were better, you could have saved him. Like it would have.
So he knew Peter's fears better than
exactly.
Peter knew.
Yeah. No, I think
and
you're
he was
totally
forcing
right.
him to.
Yep.
He was like using them. To
and just like, oh my gosh, that scene of like the Iron Man suit, like with the skull like crawling out of the grave.
Dude, I was like, he's not.
I was like, that's
right
messed
now.
up. I was like, that's what you do. That's what you do when you're the villain. And so that got me so stoked of like this. This is emotional villainy. Like, this is what you do when you're trying to ruin somebody inside. And I feel like, because I feel like we haven't had a psychological villain in a lot of the other MCU movies. And maybe I'm forgetting some, but I feel like for the most part, it's just been like might and power. So I think to see a villain who like literally has no superpowers, like he does not.
His only power is he's got technology.
He's got technology.
Is Tony Stark basically?
Right, exactly. He's the anti-Tony Stark.
Yeah,
he's the anti-Stark, and so, for him to just like dive head deep into like, oh, easy. Like Tony gave these glasses to this teenage kid who's like hormonal, like wants to date this girl, and now he like doesn't want to be this. I'm diving in, man.
Well, that's the thing too is.
Let's get
a lot of what Peter was doing, like he wanted to do, like chase this girl, but Beck was like feeding that to him as well. Yeah. He was like, "Hey, like
he's like, dude,
you deserve a break.
Like,
you should be chasing after."
Yeah, this is what you should.
So it's
be
almost
doing.
like Peter was doing these things because he was being manipulated.
Yeah.
His emotions and feelings were being manipulated by an older dude.
Right. When especially and as you're saying that too, because you have every other adult or every other person in his life is this authoritarian responsibility with the message of responsibility. So he doesn't have anyone telling him like, you know what, Peter, your feelings are valid. Like this is hard, but like we need to push through. You have Nick Fury who's like, come on, son, like you don't hang up on me. Like let's go, or you have Happy.
Maybe
who's
that
like,
was the after credit scene.
That was the second one was.
So you've seen
reveal.
both, but you didn't see them both in theaters.
I have not seen the second one, but I know what happens is the reveal that Nick Fury is actually a Skrull
or whatever.
So, which that opens up a whole nother can of worms, which I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what's the deal with that. So that'll be really interesting. Yeah. But anyway, so yes, Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio was fantastic. I really loved the scene with like in the Mirage and Peter like punching the walls and stuff and like all the things breaking down and then getting hit by the train. Also him ending up in like the Netherlands was like, shout out to my people. Like that was like the funniest thing ever. And like him giving him like the soccer jersey and he's like, can I use your phone? He's like, take it. You're like, this is great. So that was awesome.
One of my favorite scenes was when Peter finally does decide to like, when he calls Happy and Happy comes picks him up in the field. And then he starts using the machine. Yeah. And Happy's like, can I turn some music on or something?
Yep.
And he turns on Back in Black, and he like sees Peter tinkering, which looks just like Tony Stark in the first Iron Man. And then he throws on the song that Tony was listening to in that movie.
Yep.
And it's just like this callback to like, okay, now he's actually taking up the mantle of Iron Man.
Yeah.
And like he knows he can't do it. He knows he doesn't have the strength to do it, but he's doing it anyway because that's what Tony would have done.
Yeah.
And that's what Tony did do. Like he didn't think he could like defeat Thanos and do all this stuff, but like he sacrificed himself anyway for it.
Yeah.
And now Peter's taking up that mantle, and it's just like this cute little scene where Happy's like, "Oh man, like this is
he's
like
good.
Tony.
This is how it should be."
Yep.
Definitely. I love Led Zeppelin. Like, that was fantastic. I love that. And honestly, even this run around too, I loved how much they spent with Happy as well, because I feel like he's one of those underrated, under the radar characters where, you know, he's got this personality that's really electric and like fun to see, but he's, you know, he's not a hero, so we don't get to spend a lot of time with him. So like all the stuff with like him and May, and
I
like,
loved all that
at
stuff.
At the end, like when Peter's like, we need to talk about this, and then he's like, what's the deal with you? And he's like, we're together. We're not together. What? And they're like, well, like, you know, sometimes when you love each other, you just like keep it open. Yeah, you see where things go. And they're just like,
and they're not on the same page at all.
Peter's like, I gotta go. I'm out of here. So that was awesome.
That
so
was
I love
awesome.
that. And the other few notes I had is like, I love Ned. Ned is like the friend everybody wants. Ned's the best. And then like the whole like relationship thing with him, that like. I think in the beginning I needed to get out my thoughts, but like as you kind of process through with me, like I'm appreciating the
like they were like almost foil, like making fun of teenagers.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they were like, this is what they actually do,
and this
is how cringy it is.
Right, exactly.
But how funny it is, like how cute and funny it is at the same time.
Yeah. So like, so Ned and like they literally touch hands on the plane, they get off, and then they're just like, oh, we're dating now, and then at the end. Toy's like,
sometimes you just gotta let it go.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, you're so wise. And Peter's like, what? Like, what do you mean? Yeah, and it's like, oh my gosh, you're totally right. That's absolutely what teenagers are like, and that's why we hate them.
I love that whole thing.
Yeah,
a lot of good laughs.
And then the only other big thing, and then I'd love to hear like some of the scenes that you stood out was, I can't freaking believe that J.K. Simmons is coming back as Triple J. Like. That was incredible. And this Alex Jones character too, where he's like, here's people, we need to listen to this. Spider-Man is a menace. And like just how he dove into it, I was like, this is fantastic.
It reminds me so much of the podcast on the Spider-Man game.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Where he's just like a straight up like Alex Jones conspiracy.
He's like, I agree with you, JJ. Like Spider-Man needs to get in. He's like, this man is a man of the people, and he's looking out for you and for me, because who's gonna look out for us from Spider-Man? Like just all that stuff. It was like, I love it. I love it so much.
I just can't believe they actually brought like the guy back.
The guy,
like, it's like crossover now.
Like, absolutely.
And I like geeked out, and Evan's like, I don't get it, and I
literally started clapping in the theater.
That's the same guy. That's the same guy playing the same character from the original trilogy.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, let's go.
Yeah, and I like can't see anyone else as JJ. Like he's just like
he does it so well.
Yeah,
I feel like that after credit scene got me even more excited for the next movie than this movie and the last movie were, because like
absolutely.
I feel like they're finally hinting at like this is going to be a movie about Spider-Man.
Yep.
This is going to be a movie like he's past the Avengers stuff, and like this is, I mean, it'll still be there because you can't ignore the rest of the world, but it'll be interesting to see finally like Spider-Man. It's almost like whatever Dark Knight movie where he's like in hiding or something, like because the world thinks he was the one that did all the bad stuff.
Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah. And so like it'll be kind of like that where Peter's like almost running from like his identity or something, or like he's still trying to be the hero while everybody's coming after him, and like JK's spouting off his nonsense to millions of viewers, and it's, oh man, I'm so excited for
I'm really freaking stoked.
That after credit scene got me hyped.
Yeah.
Plus just getting to see some of like the swinging through the city, like I feel like we don't get enough of that, like just swinging through the mean streets of New York, and he's like carrying her with him, and she's like, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, she's like, I'm done. This is cool and all, but not anymore. And I did that, to me was the biggest curveball of like, Beck was a messed up dude and he had some issues, but I was like, but he just straight up ousted him. I was like, no way. Like I did not see that coming. Like
when Peter said like execute them all, I was like, that sounds weird.
Yeah, I was like, something about that. I was
and
like,
then when they used it against him, I'm like, oh snap!
I was like, that's what you would
plans.
do. Yeah, and
so
to
he
me,
orchestrated
that
the whole thing.
That
probably
was brilliant. Yeah, I love that. And I have my fingers crossed because I know the director and there's a couple other producers that have been they've been wanting to do Kraven and to bring Kraven in, or Task. Like I have my heart set on either Taskmaster or Kraven being the next villain in this one because I feel like they would be the perfect like people to like come in and be like, or if they just did like the what is it, the Sinister Six?
Yeah,
is it?
I mean, we've already gotten a couple of them now, so
yeah. And I someone was alluding to the fact that the guy who Vulture ran into in Homecoming, who was in prison, was Electro, or that that guy could be Electro. So you could have like all of a sudden.
Wasn't there an after credit scene where some guy went down into like a thing and there was like a room filled with items? Maybe I'm thinking of a whole different thing.
Yeah, I don't remember that, later, but I could see them doing like a whole Sinister Six movie because now it's like the whole world is against Spider-Man, and so they're looking for someone to come and like fight him, you know. So then if it turns into this like Peter's got to take on all of them.
I don't know all of the bad guys, but if there's another one that like could potentially portray themselves as a hero, and almost like Spider-Man knows that something's going on, that this villain who's acting as a hero, like almost like a Mysterio character where like something bad is going on, but he's presenting himself as a hero. So Spider-Man both has to fight this villain while being chased by him and the entire city. Like the villain's almost convinced the entire city to work with him.
Right.
Like that could be an interesting Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't know the full range of Spider-Man's villains.
Definitely.
Or maybe we get Venom.
Tom Hardy?
Carnage and Venom.
Tom Hardy's going to come in the next one? Tommy boy. Dude, I don't know. As you say that, I could see that being kind of cool. Like that. Dang.
Oh, Amazing Spider-Man 2 had a after credit scene. It was like this room somebody walked into, and it had like the Vulture, Doc Ock.
Oh, okay.
Doc Ock.
Ooh.
We haven't gotten him in the new ones. I feel like
that could be cool.
That could be kind of cool.
That could be cool.
Because he, at least in the games, he was kind of like a good scientist trying to like advance science, and then he kind of like
goes crazy.
The technology destroys his brain basically, and like
yeah.
There's a lot of options. I feel like there's so much cool Spider-Man
the world
stuff.
is their oyster in terms of that, which I think is going to be amazing. Like,
I feel like Spider-Man has some of the coolest villains, and we haven't gotten enough of it yet.
Yeah.
We've gotten 2 amazing villains, but I want more. I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, especially when you have them, the majority of them, I feel like because they're on this neighborhood villain level almost in a way, you know, like they're not on this galactic, like I'm trying to steal your kingdom or I'm trying to find this magic cube.
Yeah.
Like it's just, they're like, I want to steal money from banks. Like I want, there's almost like something funny of like, I feel like when we were kids, all the villains were like the bank robber villains, and it was like, oh my gosh, just get a job, dude. Like that's the feeling.
Yeah, they're not like world destroying, or world conquering. They're like, they're robbing banks, they're causing chaos, they're like stealing chemicals from chemical labs and stuff. Like, it's all rooted in like New York City rather than like trying to take over the world.
Right. Whereas now there's been this hard left swing where it's like galactic threats and all this stuff, which has been cool because it was all purposed for like a legit universal threat. But I feel like there's part of me that's kind of craving like a fun bank robber,
like almost like a more
kind of thing. Campy superhero. Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know exactly what direction they're going in yet, but I feel like they almost have to divide the universe into like Earth and like space. Yeah. Because like there's so many heroes now where like, okay, Black Panther, Spider-Man, like they've been like Peter's been in space, but like he's not a space like fighter. Like he's not gonna fare very well if he's constantly having to battle these like aliens and stuff. Like, so I'm wondering if they'll have like the Nova Corps and or not Nova Corps, the Eternals and like Captain Marvel like are protecting Earth from like space threats, but then
that
like
would be interesting.
Black Panther, like the Earth Avengers versus like the Space Avengers, like something like that maybe.
That would be kind of cool.
Because I would kind of like that. Instead of like every movie ends up just being Endgame now, where like everything is like galactic and spacey, and like we never get this campy superhero, fun like goofy villain stuff. Right. And I think you can write things like that aren't actually like goofy, but like fun.
Yeah, just like more lighthearted. I feel like because I feel
as
like
long as we don't get emo Spidey.
Oh my gosh.
The world hates me. Everybody hates me.
Everybody hates me, man.
Unless he actually like gets the Venom thing.
That would
That'd
be
cool.
Interesting. Dude, legit. If they
emo Tom Holland.
If they emo Tom Holland. If like legit, if they brought Tom Hardy into the third movie, I'd
be down for that. Yeah.
I would be juiced, like,
especially if the writers of Far From Home wrote it and not the writers of Venom.
Yup. Yeah. So that could be cool too. Just, I don't know. I know that the director and the writers had said that they tried to write themselves into the hardest corner that they could find, because they were like, how else is this third movie going to be interesting if it's like, oh, he has Mary Jane now, like, and then the start of the next movie is like,
tossing crap at it
exactly.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if this will be the last one then, because I know Sony is like itching to get Spider-Man back, to get him into their universe, and then at that point I'm like, oh, please don't.
Then I'm like,
please don't try again. Stop. Just stick with the animated stuff.
Yeah. I will say, I do wonder if they would start hiring or contracting out some of the Marvel writers, where it's like, okay, they're still under our property, but maybe they can like write to the quality that people are expecting, because there's part of me too that, like, okay, let's say, I don't know.
For me, it's like, how do you turn this into, because if this is the last Spidey movie and Tom Holland can't be in any more Avengers movies or anything,
right?
How do you write that off in a way that makes sense?
Right.
It doesn't feel like, oh, you just got rid of Spider-Man. Just because you can't afford to have him anymore.
Right. Here, as we're talking, here's my only fear is, because this is what my coworker and I were saying, that I feel like the 10-year MCU was a fluke. Like, it was a 1 in a million chance that ended up being like one of the greatest plans in cinema history, in like creative production history, that paid off momentously. And I feel like we're starting to get into the territory already early on where things are going to get more dicey. Like, Sony still owns the rights for Spider-Man, and maybe Disney's just going to like throw them a deal that they can't say no to.
Yeah, I mean,
but there's
Disney,
part of me,
so.
Or same thing with Hulk, like with Universal. It's like there's part of me where it's like, things are getting dicey, where you don't have the commitment not only from the actors, but like even from the other people that have these IPs. What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like the MCU at this point has become like the comics, where unless you reboot it every so often, like, people aren't going to have jumping on points anymore. Because I know plenty of people who like haven't seen all the movies and they want to, but they're like, I don't think I would get it. Like, because even like watching Endgame with Evan, she was like, it was interesting, but I don't get it. Like, I don't get anything. So we had to go back and watch all of the movies to kind of make it all make sense. And it's like, at what point is it like too much now for people to like, is there going to be like a dying off period where like no new people are coming anymore because like there's like 30 movies now? Like, I don't get any of this. Like, it doesn't, like, none of these characters make sense because I haven't seen their entire back history, and I don't know. And maybe part of that is killing off characters so they can start fresh and a new generation of people can experience whatever.
Right.
But I agree. I'm afraid of what will happen because I think Endgame and this whole saga was just like a 1 in a million chance. Like, there's a reason it's never been done before, having a 22 movie cinematic universe.
Right,
like,
exactly.
because it's nigh impossible. Like,
right.
It should not have happened.
Yeah.
And somehow Disney and Marvel made it work. But
yeah.
if they can pull it off again, like, I'll be there clapping on the sidelines.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's not to say that I want them to fail, but I think
I'll still see the movies.
Absolutely. Like, I'm still, because at this point I'm committed and I've seen every single one, and like I'm just gonna stay. But
every time I watch a new movie, I tell myself, like, is this gonna be like the last one where it's like they finally like screwed it up and like And it's like it hasn't happened yet, really. Like, Captain Marvel for me was kind of like, okay, so this is kind of like drawing it back to square one with like Iron Man 1 and Captain America 1 and stuff, but they haven't really like bombed yet, like Batman vs Superman or something.
And I wonder if they're almost maybe like the next slew of movies that we're getting of the individual heroes and stuff, that the refresher will be, because I feel like we've been saturated with the last like 5 or 6 have all been very key components to
tied into the
final like resolution. Whereas now the next one is literally, it's like, no, Thanos is not coming tomorrow. Like, Spider-Man's just trying to survive, and that I think will be an amazing film in its own right versus an amazing MCU film.
Yeah, and I think because they've confirmed that Spider-Man was like the last of this phase,
mm-hmm.
I think that's confirmation that like Doctor Strange 2 or Black Panther 2, like
those
movies won't deal with the aftermath of Endgame anymore. It'll be like, okay, it's been a long time, like there's new things going on and we're dealing with new things. Like they'll somehow write it in a way that it makes sense, that they're no longer thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be rooted in their psyche, like we're paranoid about galactic threats now and like all these things, but it'll be more subtle like the original Avengers films were, and it'll probably build back up into who knows what.
Yeah, exactly.
Some massive galactic threat that Thanos would get stomped down like a pedal.
Yeah.
Like a pebble.
And honestly, like I don't want them to do Galactus, but that's my preference, but I
don't really like galactic things.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in space stuff, but if you're going to do it like good or interesting. Yeah. Like I loved the Guardians films.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was because we got to see like cool places and cool, interesting things, and there was interesting dynamics between the characters.
Right, and I feel like the goals in those movies were smaller. You know, mm-hmm. like it's like Star-Lord's meeting his dad or whatever, and you know, there's like big things happening, but there wasn't like this looming threat of like everything is doomed. And I think with who Thanos was, and with how they wrote him, and how the world had led into that, and all the details behind it. It was incredible, and I loved every second.
Yeah,
but I don't want like another giant like. If I look at you, you're dead kind of.
Yeah,
character.
The only time that I will want a giant character is in another 10 years.
Yeah,
I think like I would want to build up like the first Avengers, Loki, and then Ultron, and kind of like having villains that are like big time and they have big plans, but like they're actually small relative to the universe.
Right,
and you kind of like get these villains that subtly reveal things about who the real threat that's coming, and then all of a sudden that thing comes in 10 years, and then it pays off. I'm afraid Disney's just going to start getting that like remake greed that somehow they haven't like given into yet with like the MCU. I'm afraid they're going to start trying to pump out even more movies, and like, or they're going to like want the payoff quicker. Like, let's get an Endgame in 5 years this time. Let's get an Endgame in 3 years this time, instead of like building it up, because at this point they're like, we're just making money, so we can do whatever we want now. Right. And I think comic fans are kind of fickle, so it'll eventually die off.
Which I wonder if that's
they
part
do
of,
start to do that.
I wonder if that's one of the things that's holding them back, is we know that if we don't do this not perfectly, but if we don't do this right and pay it justice, there's going to be a huge chunk
and
of
I get the sense that like
leave.
Kevin Feige or whatever, however you pronounce his name, like he seems to know what he's doing. Like he probably has a rapport with the Disney people and says like, how about you just let me do what I'm doing, because you see it works. So like let's stick with my plans, and you guys just handle the money.
You hold the money.
So hopefully like they have a good dynamic there, like it seems right now.
Definitely.
That continues to produce quality stuff, and as long as they continue to produce quality stuff that works, I'll continue to give them my money. So.
Same. So I think
we've moved past Spider. We always jump into the MCU once we're
kind of done discussing the film. And it's exciting. I feel like it is exciting to see, you know, what is going to be this next phase and what that's going to entail. But there's also a little bit of like nervousness of like, ooh, are we tipping to the edge? You know?
And it is interesting the juxtaposition between the two after credit scenes, because the first one is like suggesting neighborhood like Spider-Man.
Small,
but then the second one is like, oh frick, is Nick Fury building like an army of Kree soldiers? Like, there's like this whole spaceship full of like Kree battleships and stuff, and I'm like, something's going down. Or he's like preparing. He's basically like building the Avengers, but like now we need to be able to take on people like Thanos' level at any given point. So
I also know that there's like the Kree invasion, or I think in the comics it was the Skrull invasion, and the Kree were
they
the
kind
good
of
ones,
inverted
right?
that for the sake of Captain Marvel.
But I mean that could be a cool like 10-year thing, is like all of a sudden it's like, wait, this dude was a Kree the whole time, or like this dude was this, and like that could be a cool, fun, lesser, you know, type villain thing. So I honestly don't want them to do Galactus, and I almost don't know who else they would do, you know, like
they almost
than
have
him.
to.
And at that point it's like you're fighting like more or less the god of the MC universe.
That's the thing, is like I'll be interested to see, because I know they're doing an Eternals movie, which is getting some big name actors and actresses for it, but I don't know much about the Eternals. I just know they're almost like godlike beings, or like angel type beings. So if you have that, Captain Marvel, and like whoever else they can come up with that's more like galactic forces, like that could be interesting if it juxtaposes like the Earth Avengers, and maybe they do have like two sideline, like two running lines that like end up connecting at certain points. So like we have the two Avengers, but then all of a sudden like space and Earth meet because like the space they got past our forces or something. And
right.
Like, I don't know. They could do interesting things that they haven't been able to do yet because everything's been kind of just building up to the space stuff.
Right.
So
definitely.
I don't know. I'm excited to see what comes.
Totally.
Because they haven't really announced much
yeah,
after this. Like
absolutely.
we know that sequels are coming, but we don't know when or what ones. So
definitely. Cool.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I feel like looking at my list, I kind of hit everything. I feel like we kind of did a cursory
of
the movie.
Everything.
Yeah.
The suits were cool.
Yeah. That like red black suit was dope. I dug it.
The stealth, the night monkey suit.
That was I love that.
Yeah.
I freaking love it. It's the like European version, night monkey. That was great.
Oh, Ned. So yeah, I don't think I have any other thoughts. That's
sweet.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Go out and see it especially probably not if you haven't seen like Endgame and stuff.
Yeah. Go see that first.
I mean, I think it would still be good, but a lot of the emotional stuff might not make as much sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, all good.
It's good though.
Good deal. Sweet. Well, as a reminder, you can check out this podcast and other episodes in our back catalog on popculturepunks.com or on your favorite platform to listen to podcasts or music. iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, Spotify. Those are some of the mainstays that we have our stuff on. You can send us an email or a contact to send us some feedback or episode suggestions on our website at popculturepunks.com/contact. And there's some other content up there. Just kind of peruse around. There's like 4 tabs. It's not very
check it out
robust, but it's got all you need.
Yep.
And that's all you need. So with that, this has been our discussion of Spider-Man Far From Home. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. But until then, we bid you a fun Spider Monkey Cowbunga.
Booyah.
Yesterday, but the crowd comes singing back. just don't